You are standing at the grocery checkout, watching the total climb past what you budgeted, and somewhere between the chicken and the cereal, something crossed a line you didn't draw. You didn't buy anything extravagant, you bought the same things you always buy. And somehow, the number is higher again. The average American household spends $519 every month on groceries, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that number has moved in one direction since 2020. Most people blame general inflation and stop there, because that explanation requires nothing more. Here is a better one. When the price of a barrel of crude oil rises by just $10, the typical household eventually pays roughly $300 more per year at the grocery store, about $25 extra every month, through a chain of costs that starts nowhere near a gas station and never gets reported as an oil story. Most economists describe this connection as vague inflationary pressure. This video walks through the actual mechanics, dollar by dollar. But to follow the money, you first have to follow the oil. And it goes somewhere most people would never think to look. Most people assume oil prices hit their grocery bill at the gas station and that the damage stops there. But the oil price already entered your food supply months before any truck left the warehouse. And it entered through something most people associate with gardens, not geopolitics: fertilizer. Here is what almost nobody talks about. The nitrogen fertilizer that grows the majority of American corn, wheat, and soybeans is made through a process called the Haber-Bosch method, which combines nitrogen from the air with hydrogen stripped from natural gas. Natural gas is not just the energy source powering the factory, it is the raw material the factory consumes. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, natural gas accounts for between 70 and 90% of variable production costs for synthesizing ammonia, so the foundation of every major nitrogen fertilizer on the market. Because natural gas prices move in close correlation with crude oil, sharing the same energy market dynamics, a rise in oil produces a rise in fertilizer costs within 6 to 12 months. This matters because fertilizer is not a minor expense on a farm budget. According to USDA data, it accounts for approximately 15 to 17% of total production costs for corn. When you are farming thousands of acres, that is a massive and unavoidable bill. The numbers confirm how violent this can become. When oil and gas prices surged between 2021 and 2022, the cost of anhydrous ammonia, the most widely used nitrogen fertilizer in American row crop farming, jumped approximately 130% compared to January 2021 levels. And that was the steepest fertilizer price spike in modern American agricultural history, according to data presented before the U.S. Senate Committee on Agriculture. An Illinois corn farmer tracking input costs through Farm Progress was looking at roughly $170 per acre on fertilizer alone, before a single seed went into the ground. Farmers do not absorb those costs. They cannot afford to. They pass them forward through the price of their crops, and those higher crop prices travel directly into the cost of every food product made from grain. Every loaf of bread, every box of cereal, and every piece of meat raised on corn feed carries that upstream fertilizer cost all the way to the shelf. And that is just the fertilizer. The oil has not even turned an engine on yet. The fertilizer was only the beginning. Before a single bushel reaches a processing plant, the farm has been running on petroleum from the moment the tractor left the shed in spring to the moment the combine finished the last row in fall. According to USDA data, direct fuel costs represent roughly 3% of total on-farm expenditures for a standard grain operation. That sounds modest until you apply it to real acreage. On a 2,000-acre corn farm, a typical mid-size Midwest operation, a $1 increase in diesel adds between $7,000 and $10,000 in costs across a single planting and harvest cycle, depending on tillage and equipment hours. That $1 increase is not random. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation, crude oil accounts for approximately 49% of the final cost of a gallon of diesel. When crude rises by $10 per barrel, that translates into roughly a 24-cent increase at the farm pump. Across an entire growing season of tractor work, planting passes, spraying runs, and combine hours, those 24 cents accumulate into thousands of dollars per farm, and that is before grain drying. Bringing harvested corn and soybeans to a safe moisture level for storage is one of the largest and least discussed fuel expenses in agriculture. It runs primarily on propane, and propane prices, according to Farm Progress data, track crude oil prices closely across seasons. Here is what makes this important. Fertilizer cost increases and direct fuel cost increases do not offset each other. They stack on top of each other. A farmer absorbing both simultaneously faces a severely compressed margin. The only mechanism to restore that margin is raising the price of their commodity. That price increase then travels forward through every product those commodities eventually become. Once the crop is harvested, it still has to travel somewhere. And that somewhere is where oil's grip on your grocery bill tightens further. When you think about a truck delivering food, you probably picture a standard 18-wheeler moving boxes down the highway. But most of what you actually eat does not travel that way. Fresh produce, dairy, meat, frozen meals, and packaged refrigerated products travel in what the industry calls reefer units, refrigerated trailers that run a separate diesel-powered compressor to maintain temperature control throughout the journey. That compressor runs continuously. It burns diesel while the truck is moving and while it is parked at a loading dock, a weigh station, or a rest stop. This means that when fuel prices rise, a reefer operator does not face one fuel cost increase. They face two simultaneously. The truck engine burns more expensive diesel. The refrigeration unit burns more expensive diesel. Both meters are running at the same time, and neither can be switched off without destroying the cargo. The cost of this double fuel burden is already embedded in every refrigerated shipment before any oil price spike occurs. According to freight analytics data from DEET and cold chain logistics research from Temp Control Pack, national refrigerated spot rates in 2025 sit at approximately $2.35 to $2.64 per mile, roughly 10 to 20% higher than standard dry freight, specifically because of that additional fuel load and specialized equipment costs. To make this concrete, a reefer shipment carrying California lettuce to a Chicago distribution center covers approximately 2,000 miles. At $2.50 per mile, that journey costs $5,000 before the lettuce reaches a regional warehouse, before a single store has ordered it, priced it, and/or stocked it on a shelf. A $10 rise in crude directly inflates the fuel surcharge on that $5,000 journey, and every wholesaler, distributor, and retailer downstream passes that increase forward with their own margin on top. Research confirms how sensitive this leg of the supply chain is to energy prices. During the 2022 to 2023 energy price spike in Europe, per-trip costs for refrigerated carriers surged by more than 30%, a significantly steeper increase than the equivalent rise in standard freight during the same period. By the time your chicken breast reaches a distribution warehouse, it has already accumulated 3 separate layers of oil price inflation, and it still has not been packaged yet. Here is something most people have never considered. The container holding your yogurt is a petroleum product. So is the plastic wrap around your chicken, the PET bottle holding your cooking oil, the polypropylene tray under your deli meat, and the flexible film sealed across your shredded cheese. Before any of those products were filled, labeled, or shipped, a factory converted crude oil and natural gas into the plastic that holds them. This is not an indirect or metaphorical connection. Most food-grade plastic packaging is made from petrochemical feedstocks called ethylene and propylene, both produced by heating crude oil derivatives through naphtha cracking. According to plastics engineering analysis, crude oil prices correlate directly with ethylene and propylene prices. When crude rises, naphtha cracking costs increase, or when plastic resin prices follow within weeks, not months, not years, but weeks. WasteWise innovation confirms that when oil prices spike, the cost of producing virgin plastic increases, and that increase reaches food manufacturers within the same supply cycle. There is no buffer. The cost moves through almost immediately. The scale matters. The average packaged food product uses between 5 and 30 grams of plastic. That sounds negligible for one unit, But a manufacturer shipping hundreds of thousands of units per month absorbs even a fraction of a cent resin cost increase as a meaningful expense, one they pass to distributors, who pass it to retailers, who pass it to you. According to Scientific American, ExxonMobil, the world's largest producer of single-use plastics, projects that petrochemical demand will be driven by packaging rather than fuel through mid-century. Oil companies already know that your grocery store shelf is one of their primary growth markets. And this is all before the product reaches the supermarket, where oil has one final role to play. By the time a food product arrives at a supermarket, the oil price has already embedded itself into the cost of growing it, fueling the machines that harvested it, refrigerating it across 2,000 miles, and wrapping it in petroleum-derived plastic. You might assume the oil exposure stops once it arrives at the store. It does not. Every major supermarket runs a substantial internal cold chain, refrigerated display cases lining entire aisles, walk-in coolers stacked floor to ceiling, and freezer sections that never switch off. The electricity powering all of that refrigeration is partly generated by natural gas, whose price moves in close correlation with crude oil. When oil rises, utility costs rise, and supermarket operating expenses follow. But products do not travel directly from a regional warehouse to store shelves. They typically pass through one or two additional distribution center stops, each on diesel-powered trucks. According to the USDA Economic Research Service, transportation costs grew 34.4% between 2020 and 2024, faster than food prices themselves during that period. Here is the part of the system most people do not realize. Retailers do not absorb upstream cost increases. They pass them forward, and when they do, they apply their own margin percentage on top of the new, higher cost. According to USDA data, approximately 14.7 cents of every dollar spent at a grocery store goes to the retailer. When wholesale costs rise by 10% due to upstream oil pressure, that 14.7-cent margin increases in absolute terms, meaning the retailer earns more dollars on a more expensive product without changing a single policy. So when you finally scan that item at checkout, the $10 oil price increase has touched it at least 5 separate times before it reached your cart. So where does the $300 figure come from? It is not a single model applied to one variable. It is the sum of 5 transmission channels, each carrying a fraction of a $10 oil price increase through the food supply chain until all 5 arrive at the same place, your receipt. Fertilizer cost increases move through commodity prices into every grain-based product you buy. Farm fuel costs layer on top. Cold chain surcharges are built into every wholesale price. Packaging increases are embedded in per-unit costs. And supermarket logistics, distribution stops, refrigeration utilities, last-mile delivery sit on top of all of it. Each channel contributes an estimated $25 to $75 per year when oil rises by $10 per barrel, and across a moderate household basket, they total approximately $300, roughly $25 per month. And the Federal Reserve research confirms that a 10% oil price increase produces measurable food inflation over an 8-quarter lag, with larger pass-through to food prices than most other categories. Here is what most economic reporting misses. Oil price increases are not just a fuel story. They are a food story, a packaging story, a logistics story, and a farming story, all happening simultaneously, all compounding, and all arriving at the same checkout counter. The gas station price sign captures one. The other 4 never make the news. The next time someone says lower oil prices are good for drivers, remember they are also good for the family trying to afford chicken, vegetables, and rice. And the next time someone says oil is an energy issue, now you know exactly what that claim is missing. Waste energy markets and your daily life are connected more deeply than a gas station price sign suggests. If you want to understand the other hidden links between global commodity markets and your household budget, the next video covers exactly that. Subscribe so you do not miss it.